Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. I'm here today with episode 262 of Weekly Poker Hand. I want to thank you for being here with me today. If you have not already, head over to pokercoaching.com and sign up for your completely free trial. The next few episodes, we're going to be going through hands from the Sunday Million, a big online poker tournament that a poker coaching member played. And he did a lot of things great. This was about a 400 hand long tournament. But I wanted to pick out a few hands that I thought he could have potentially played better and highlight some spots that I want to make sure you are not messing up. So, it's one of the perks of being a poker coaching member. You can send me a message on Twitter and ask if I'll review your hand history, and every once in a while I just will. So anyway, right here we are very early in the tournament on the fifth hand. Notice we have some stats on our opponents. For now, you can pretty much ignore those because we're only 5 hands into the tournament, right? So if we're only 5 hands into the tournament, the stats don't really matter all that much. So early in the tournament, when you have a decent hand in the small blind, I'm pretty much always limping because if you raise and get called, you're not really loving it. And if you limp and get raised, you can very easily call. So I like limping with Queen 8 suited. We face a 4.5 big blind raise, which I think is a perfectly fine sizing. A lot of people make what I think is a mistake of raising like 250 or 300 here, because then the small blind's not really making a mistake by calling, right? Here, if your range is just very strong, it could be a mistake to call the full 450. And also, if you just pick up the pot pre-flop, realize you're putting in 350 more to try to win 308. So if you steal this more than about half the time, you just immediately profit. And I think you're going to find most people just don't defend often enough against this raise. So I like this raise size from the opponent. We decide to call. Flop comes 10-4-2, 2 clubs. We have the Queen 8 of clubs. So we have an overcard and a flush draw, which is a pretty strong hand. We check. Our opponent bets 317 into the 1,000 pot. So now we have 2 options. We can either call or raise. And this is one of these spots where, yes, the opponent should just have a range advantage in this scenario, and probably the nut advantage, because the only hands we could potentially have here that would limp call pre-flop that now have an effective nut hand are pocket 10s, 4s, and 2s, and even then we might raise 10s. We could also check raise with stuff like ace 10 or king 10. I think that would be perfectly viable, given we are very deep stacked. We're starting off playing 250 big blinds deep for those listening. By the way, if you are listening to this, we have a video version of it. You can find that at jonathanlittlepoker.com/WPH and also at jonathanlittlepoker.com/YouTube. All episodes of Weekly Poker Hand are there, archived for you with video, so check it out. Anyway, right here, I would typically just go ahead and raise, and that's because I don't think people are going to defend often enough. If we do check raise here, something like 1,000, the opponent needs to be defending with a decent chunk of their range, and unless their pre-flop raising range is just really, really nut heavy, they're going to have a difficult time doing that, I think. And we have plenty of equity, right? And notice when the 10 of clubs is on the flop, or a jack or a 9, we're going to turn some backdoor straight draw sometimes, and that just gives us even more equity. So I definitely like raising in this scenario, but hero called, and that's fine. I don't really have a problem with calling. I don't think calling is bad or anything. Clearly, folding is the only bad play. But I think raising to about 1,000 or maybe even 1,300 in this spot would have been slightly better. All right, turns the 9 of hearts. So boards 10 of clubs, 4 of hearts, 2 of clubs, 9 of hearts. So now hero turns a gut shot. And he decides to lead for half pot. Typically, you want to be leading when the turn is very good for your range and, in turn, very bad for your opponent's range. And this 9 on the turn is not particularly great for hero's range, because if you think about hero's range, to check call, it should be a lot of 10s, a lot of 4s, and a lot of 2s. And the only 10 that improved here is 10-9, right? We probably don't have 9-4 or 9-2 because we called a pre-flop raise. So this 9 really does not connect well with hero's range at all. So this is not a card hero should be leading at all. If I was in hero's shoes here, I would have check raised again, because hero would definitely, should be checking 10-9. And also, if you do have a hand like ace 10, I definitely think there is merit in check raising as well. But again, it's kind of hard to come up with too many nut hands you want to be raising in this spot, so you do have to be rather cautious. And this may be a spot where you're supposed to check call, but it's pretty nasty check calling out of position with queen high. And I understand why hero decided to lead the turn, but the problem is that it's just not a good turn for him at all. So the opponent should stick around here a lot with even like ace high. I think ace high is a pretty easy call when this line happens because it just feels really, really bluff heavy. Now, hero may decide to lead here as well with hands like a 10. That would make it a little bit better, but I'm not sure hero wants to be leading with a 10. Anyway, the opponent calls the half pot bet. By the way, I am generally not a fan of half pot bets. You're going to find that very often the half pot bets don't get called by marginal stuff, and they just put more money in than is necessary to get those marginal hands to fold. So when you're value betting, a half pot bet often does not get called by hands you're trying to get called by because they'll only call a smaller bet. And when you are bluffing, well, usually you're just risking too much. So you're going to find either a third pot bet is better or a bigger bet is better to try to get your opponents to fold a lot of their range or to get maximum value from your strong hands. So, anyway, I would have check called or check raised and probably check raised. Here he gets there on the river. A jack of spades comes. So he rivers the straight, which is perhaps the only draw he would have gotten paid on. If he did somehow get there with the club, there's a chance he doesn't get paid. But now I would definitely bet again, and I would bet on the bigger side. Pot is 3,300. Hero bets 2,200. I might go even bigger here. The opponent can very easily have a 10, which will be inclined to hero call. Opponent could also have something like queen jack that just rivered top pair. Opponent could have maybe even king jack that floated. Be bad if the opponent had king queen and floated. You may think that we shouldn't bet big because people will fold out a 10 if we bet too big, but I think if we bet something like 2,800 or 2,900 in this scenario, we're going to extract just a little bit more value in general, especially given all the bluffs missed, and there really are a lot of bluffs available in this scenario. So we bet 2,200, and now the opponent raises to 7,500, leaving himself 15,000 behind. So we're still very deep. And we have the second nuts. So the question is, do we jam or do we call? Well, what do we beat? We beat the sets. We beat two pair. All those hands could certainly raise us on this river. We obviously beat bluffs if he is bluffing. Is it actually likely that he has the king and the queen? Well, he bet the flop, sure. He called the flop lead for half pot. I think that's also viable. And he, well, raised the river, right? So that makes a lot of sense. So given the line, the opponent certainly could have king queen. But it's really, really unlikely. So this is one of these spots where in a cash game, I think we should just be all in. But in a tournament, I think there definitely is value in just calling. There's merit in just calling. There's not value in it. But there is merit in calling, right? Because if we jam and get called, I think we're going to be against straights. Well, how do we fare against straights? It's, well, clearly more likely the opponent's going to have king-queen than 8-7 because people play more king-queens with a raised pre-flop, right? So that's more likely in that scenario. If we think we're going to get called by sets, though, pocket jacks, pocket tens, pocket nines, pocket fours, pocket twos, then we definitely should raise because then, instead of being slightly behind of only straights, we beat many, many sets. So this is a scenario where if you think your opponent will fold a set to a river jam when it goes bet, raise, jam, and you probably should. If your opponent will play well, I think we need to just call this. But if the opponent's going to play poorly and call off with sets or straights, with sets, straights, and two pair, then we should definitely jam. In general, early in a tournament, this was, I believe, a $100 or $200 buy-in tournament. It's not, small potatoes. I would have likely called, but if I knew my opponent was a little bit more loose and aggressive, or I knew they just were a calling station in general, I would be more inclined to shove. That said, I think you're going to find when the board gets kind of drawy, and it ran out, Jack 9 when there was a 10 on the board. So obviously the opponent, hero could have king queen or 8-7 or queen 8 if he was bluffing on the turn with a lead, which a lot of people will just lead with their gut shots on the turn. It's possible that hero does have those strong hands. So those hands like sets may not even raise the river. And if they do raise, they will likely fold to the jam. So making the assumption that the opponent plays reasonable, I would have called as hero did. And this time he was against the king and the queen. So king-queen raised pre-flop, right, to 450. That makes sense. It bet the flop with 100% of his range because this is a very dry board. That makes sense. Called the turn lead for half pot because hero's line makes literally no sense and the opponent has overcards and a gut shot. Raised the river. And fortunately, hero did not mess up the river by jamming it. I definitely don't mind hero's call, by the way. I think folding would be atrociously bad and atrociously nitty. Sometimes when people play a little bit bigger than they're used to, Like let's say you're normally a $300 tournament player, but you go to play a few $1,500 tournaments at the World Series, you may find that nittiness, tightness, being overly cautious creeps into your strategy, and you cannot let that happen. You just have to play absolutely normally. But I do like the way that Hero played this river. I don't think he should jam, especially given legitimately no read on the opponent. However, I really don't like the turn lead. It's always important to ask who has the range advantage and who has more nut hands in their range. And in this scenario, overpairs are pretty much the nuts, and obviously the opponent has way more of those than the hero. So I know a lot of people like to lead the turn when they turn a draw, but very often it's just not the right, when they turn a better draw, but very often it's not the right play. You'd be much better off just check raising the flop. And notice here, if Hero check raised the flop and then bet the turn, he probably would have won. So that's going to be it for this episode of Weekly Poker Hand. Thanks for being here. Again, go and get your completely free trial at pokercoaching.com. We have tons of quizzes, we have homework challenges, and I am working tirelessly to build more and more and more content for all of you to help you improve your poker and your life. So check it out. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And I'll talk to you next week. Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Little. I hope you're enjoying the Thanksgiving Day marathon. Hope you're learning a lot and having a great time. Let me take a second to tell you about one of the unique features of pokercoaching.com, where every month students can submit hands, and then one of my coaches or myself will review those hands in a live webinar or in a video. And this is essentially like you getting high-end private coaching from the absolute best players in the world. I know just last month, Tristan Wade and Matt Affleck, two of the best players in the world, both reviewed Poker Coaching members' hands. And that allows them to improve their skills rapidly. So, in addition to all of the other benefits of pokercoaching.com, including over 650 interactive hand quizzes, 20 video classes, 40 challenge webinars, and 30 live coaching webinars, you have the opportunity to get your hands reviewed and essentially have a private coaching session with the best players in the world. So do not miss out on this excellent opportunity to get a membership to pokercoaching.com at a significantly discounted rate just for Black Friday. Also, one cool bonus of Poker Coaching is that some of these students, we actually back them in live tournaments of their choice, because I realize that everyone does not have the money for private coaching, which can be really expensive, and $1,000 buy-in live tournaments, but I'm happy to help all of you get those things just for being a member. So, for your chance at that, and for full access to pokercoaching.com, head over right now to pokercoaching.com/Black Friday, sign up, and I'll see you in the next webinar.